Hello again, everyone. This is part 2 of my Alex Toth series. Now, I hope you can get a good look at this. From the way I see it, it doesn't look as black as it could be, the blacks. But this image right here is just, it struck me so strongly when I first saw it. It's like, I don't know, the beautiful composition, the water, the ship, the alien ships hovering over it, going into some kind of circle, and the beautiful blacks here. He did this, I believe, it must have been the early 70s. And this image right here, I mean, if you were to ask me a single image that really just shows Toth at his most uniqueness, and most like strangest, individualistic, this could be it. I mean, he has so many, striking images across his entire career, but man, this one is just so beautiful, so beautifully designed. Such care taken here, and just the right amount of detail. Stunning. Okay, so I showed all the books I have of Toth yesterday. And I did show this for a split second, but I forgot to look through it. It's called Toth, One for the Road, by the same editor, Manuel Aud. And as it says here, take a nostalgic look back to the great old days of hot roading, dry lake racing. I guess it's supposed to be hot rodding, but maybe it's 2 Ds there, hot roading. And hot rod humor with the one and only Alex Toth. And this is more of his cartoony work, whereas his main work is usually, it's realistic but stylized. Realistic but stylized. And as opposed to yesterday, a friend of mine told me that I think I had the cinematic, I guess, video, and it kept blurring out a lot of the images, so hopefully this is going to work this time. I'm learning as I go. I'm trying to figure this out. And by the way, just to let you know, if you're watching, this will be recorded, but I have a live show, a live streaming show, Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, where I'll be answering questions. And I assumed I was eligible for, to monetize my channel, but I have all the things except for the views, except for the number of views, which I guess has to do with a few thousand views. Anyway, I got to figure that out, but I just want to go a little through this book, actually, like I did with the others, and just to show you a different kind of aspect of Toth's work. I mean, look at the cartoony, look at that. I mean, it's just, but look at this. There's so much life in his art. I mean, just so much life. And again, it doesn't have to be realistic, but as long as it has life in it, that's what makes it cartoony. It's like stylized realism, but this one he goes a little further into caricature, and he's great at it. I mean, absolutely great. And I believe that's Zipatone back there for the background bushes. Beautiful. Let's just look through a few more. Look at that. Hairiest hag on the track. Old Granny McGo and the hairiest hag on the track. Hilarious. I guess he had these recurring characters here. Look at this. Incredible. There's nothing much to say when I'm looking at his work, to be honest. I'm just, I'm always in awe of it. It's just so good. I mean, look at that. Look at that cartoony work. Wow. Look at that. I think Big Daddy Roth, he called him. Let's see if that's Big Daddy. Look at that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to skim through this a little. I want you to get to know the man. And by that, Before I go through all of his beautiful art books, right? On those collections that I showed you yesterday. Look at this. Look at the shading on that. I mean, look at the three-dimensionality. The white and the gray and the black. It's just, everything looks, even though it's cartoony, it looks lifelike. It has a lifelike quality to it. Look at this. The white really pops out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, yeah, look at this. I mean, from the lettering, he even did his lettering here. He did all the lettering here. Look at that guy. I mean, look at that. I mean, it's fantastic. Fantastic cartooning. Look at this. The anatomy is just right. It's realistic. And then that's not realistic within the same cartoon. Look at this. And that's what I did in Table for One, a book that Toth himself liked, my first graphic novel. I decided that I'm going to draw the characters if they're, I'm going to draw those less realistically who are less realistic in the way they view life, in the way if they're less realistic, I drew them less realistically. If they're more realistic, meaning if they take life seriously, I drew them more seriously. And that was what I decided to design the characters with from that basic premise. And it worked. I mean, I still had them interact with each other on an even basis, even though some of them looked really, really cartoony caricatures. So yeah, I just wanted to go through this. I forgot to do that yesterday. I showed you all the books besides this. So yeah, okay, so I'm going to, here are two magazines that came out a number of years ago. This one, 2001. This one, 2006, after Toth died. And it's a retrospective on Toth. So what I'm going to do in this second video of my Toth series, I'm going to read some of the interviews that Toth did. And so I'm going to, maybe one or two, and as each video I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go in this one and read all the retrospectives of people who were talking about him. I even redlined a number of these things here. Paul Revoch, who's in Comics Kings with me now, he interviews Toth in this, and he was a friend of his. Again, I just corresponded with Toth a few times. That was it. But Paul actually went to conventions with him. He spent time with him. He spoke with him. So he had a real relationship with him, which is, I envy that, because I would have loved to have just spoken to Toth for a little while and just figured, just picked his brain. I'd love to do that with maybe Dave Mazzucchelli at a certain point. I don't know, though. I don't think he's as accessible, maybe, as Toth might have been. Not that he's more recluse. I think Toth truly was a recluse, but I remember I tried to get in the School of Visual Arts. I kept hearing that Dave Mazzucchelli, the great Dave Mazzucchelli, was teaching at School of Visual Arts and at the Rhode Island School of Design. But I could never find the courses. I don't know what that was about. No one would tell me what I called him. I don't know if if he gave an order to not let anyone know where he might be teaching in certain semesters. I don't know. I just was never able to sign up for his classes. Strange. But anyway, my point is that Paul had the great privilege of spending time with the Toth, with the master. So yeah, I just wanted to show you this. So I'm going to look through this one tonight, and look through it and see which one I'm going to read first. Look at this even. A swashbuckling hero. That was his favorite type of heroes. Look at that. The fox, his own creation. Alex Toth, Before I Forget. This was about 5 years before he died. Celebrating the art and the life of Alex Toth. Alex Toth, Picture Perfect. I guess I could, I guess I can start here. That's a doodle of Toth, his own profile. They did. So, I just wanted to see something quick. He had an autobiographical essay, Toth, himself here. I'm just afraid I might be, I won't be able to read every word and skip over some and maybe not be able to understand them the way he wrote them. So if you have this, I recommend it big time. It's called Comic Book Artist number 11, January 2001. I'm assuming you can get it online, you know, some eBay or somewhere. I recommend it big time. There was an interview he did with this magazine. I think this is the same one that Paul did the interview with. Yes, he did. Paul Ravoch quizzes Toth on the craft of continuity art. Quote unquote, smoke across a cloud, unquote. So this is where Paul interviews the man. And they speak like friends, the way they relate to each other. I think Toth at one point tells Paul, who's being overly critical with his own art, said, "What are you bitching about, Paul? You do solid work." Yeah, pretty funny. But I remember that. It really jumped out at me. I thought that was hilarious. Only friends can talk to each other like that. But yeah, so let me just start here. Alex Toth, Picture Perfect. Editor's rant, John B. Cook. The difficult task of articulating the brilliance of the artist's work. So again, I want you to have a decent idea of the man, his attitude, his particular words, what he thinks about comic books and art in general, and about life. I think it's a good way to open a door to his character and then show you the man's art. So I thought that was, I think, the best way to do it. Get to know him a little first, get to know his ideas first, and then see them implemented in his art. And as I go along this thing, you'll see his art. But there's nothing like those huge books that I have. And by that time, I'm going to get my setup here, you know, better, so I can really get every inch of those big books. I got something in my shopping cart on Amazon that might do the trick. Okay, so, oh boy, this is John B. Cook. This is how he starts. Oh boy, asked me to give a logical analysis of why Alex Toth is one of the greatest cartoonists of all time. Anyway, and you'll quickly suspect I'm hardly perfect for that job. The only way I can explain the excellence of his work is to try and relate to you how Toth's art makes me feel and what the man means to me. It's the quiet things I like best in his work. Hell, I take a delicate, sensitive Toth romance story over a rock'em sock'em superhero saga by Alex just about any day. Unless, of course, it was a Black Canary tale, which Toth did and ended up drawing right here. Filled with nuance, subtlety, honest truth, clarity, joy, and simplicity, his work reveals a sensitive and caring artist, uncompromising and resolute. With Alex, the story is the thing. To paraphrase the Bard, with Alex, the story is the thing. Every detail, every line, every thought and drawing must be in service to the tale being told. No fancy chicken scratching, no over-rendered anatomy, no slick showboating. Nope. In his essays, you'll find an oft-repeated axiom. Simplify, simplify, simplify. A phrase which might be shortened to a single simplify, surely. And his work is true to that declaration. Spartan, concise, and deceptively simple. Toth's work is proof that less is more and of the maximum visual impact of his minimalism. Foremost, Alex loves the art form and is as smart about the field as he is in his craftsmanship. A dyed-in-the-wool comics fan, as enthusiastic today about the artistry of any number of wonderful cartoonists, be they Jack Cole, Harvey Kirtman, Lou Fine, Noel Sickles, etc., as any passionate aficionado. Toth is a vocal advocate for appreciating the great comics work of yesterday. Of the current scene, the artist is not silent. He cherishes truth in art and vehemently abhors dishonest work, as apt to rigorously savage any slacking cartoonist and rake the industry off the coals for its shortcomings while he's at it, as he is to wax emotionally about a contemporary's work he may admire. For me, the startling aspect of his work is an overwhelming sense of perfection whenever I come across an hitherto unseen Toth story. Nearly every approach he takes in the work feels fresh and unique. Characters' faces are unusually unstereotypical. Oh, and I could go on and on. So suffice to say, Toth's work is consistently joyous to behold. For the first or 500th time. Absolute true. And then he goes, the celebration of the master is woefully short. What it doesn't contain could fill up another half-dozen issues. A comprehensive retrospective of Toth's entire career, detailing surveys of his 1940s and 50s art, spotlights on his animation career, succinct analysis of his magnum opus Bravo for Adventure, more of his handwritten essays and doodles, and perhaps an anecdotal history of his life. But I hope that this issue will shed some light on the artist. I'm especially proud to feature probably the most thorough checklist of Toth ever published, and I'm bummed not to include enough repros of his glorious 60s to 70s Warren and DC work. So, kind reader, just because CBA, comic book artist, neglects to showcase his creepy, eerie, blazing combat, star-spangled war stories, Hot Wheels, witching hour, etc., doesn't mean you shouldn't seek out those treasures yourself. I hope we've done the artist some justice, and we hope you, whether you're a Toth fanatic or one of those who wonder what all the fuss is about, enjoy this heartfelt tribute to the man I consider to be America's greatest living cartoonist, Alexander Toth. My thanks most of all to the Hungarian comic book artist for allowing us to feature him in this most eagerly anticipated issue. I'm not the easiest or organized magazine editor most times, and I hope Alex will forgive this issue's shortcomings. I also appreciate the support and contributions of the many Toth fans and CBA friends who so graciously helped us out, primarily Mark Chirillo, who was the editor, the art director at DC Comics, who was very friendly to me whenever I contacted him. And Paul Revoch, the great cartoonist, who I'm glad to correspond with at times. Jim Amash, Manuel Aud, Jim Vedabankur, Andrew Stevens, Steve Cohen, Don Mangus, David A. Roach, Terry Beatty, Philip Hester, Lancelot Falk, John Hitchcock, Paul Powers, Terry Austin, the great Terry Austin, the great inker, and Richard Rowe. I realize I must have missed a few folks here, but please note I appreciate everyone who helped. And God willing, this is not the last we'll see of Alex Toth in the pages of CBA. With Alex's permission, we hope to continue his great column, Before I Forget, and no doubt we'll be examining other aspects of his marvelous career in the future. Keep ye eyes peeled. Sorry this is late. Happy belated holidays, and our best to you in 2001. Look for CBA number 12 in March. Contributors. Alex Toth first. Al Williamson also. That's a Toth drawing of Wonder Woman. For a fan. As I said, I'm going to probably have to stop one too many times to figure out some of the words. Because again, while his lettering is beautiful, it's not like text where I can just, read it clearly. So I think if you ever have the chance to get this issue, I do recommend it. So I think, as I said again, for tonight, I'll read this one interview, call it a night, and then read the next one tomorrow, and so on, until we get a good idea from the man himself, who he is, what he thinks, what he believes, what his beef was with the comic book industry, and then we can go through the art. A talk with Alex Toth. Paul took this picture of Alex, Paul Revoch. So it says above, Paul Revoch shared a ride with Alex Toth from the Masters Hollywood home to a San Diego comic convention in the early 1980s. Paul took this shot of the artist beside Alex's Impala ragtop. I guess Impala, that's how you pronounce it. I hope I'm being right. Anyway, so a talk with Alex Toth, CBA comic book artist, converses with a master of comic book art. In considering the most influential and important comic book artists of all time, Alex Toth's name is never far from the top of anyone's shortlist. Indeed, many of today's industry professionals wouldn't hesitate to call him simply the best there ever was. Few artists of his caliber can contemplate and study the art form as intensely, and with such obvious love for the form. As our interview's subject, as passionate and often angry today as he was as one of the first true comics fans back in the late 1930s and early 40s, CBA had the pleasure of interviewing the artist in his Hollywood home in February 2000, and Alex copy-edited the transcript. So comic book artist says, is it fair to say that your great desire was to be a syndicated newspaper cartoonist? And Toth says, yes. Being a creature of my time, then the big deal was, God, I want to be Milton Caniff. I didn't discover Noel Sickles and what he did with strips until long after he'd left Scorchy Smith for AP features. And I found him in those little reprint pages and famous funnies, 5 tiers of much reduced Sickles artwork. It was succeeded by Bert Kreisman, who left the strip after a year or so for a stint at National Periodical Publications, DC, to do The Three Aces and The Sandman, and then left to become one of the first 100 AVG Flying Tiger pilots flying against the Japanese in China and Burma, and then died there in action. Wow. All this before Pearl Harbor, mind you. But yes, it was my dream to do what Caniff, Raymond, and Foster had done, and to be an illustrator as well, because I loved what I saw in the Saturday Evening Post and Liberty, and all the other slick weekly and monthly magazines. Collier's and Collier's, or Collier's. So CBA says, but you don't regret that you toiled in a different medium? Alex says, I do and don't. As Charlie Schultz put it just before he died, I didn't want to let go. It was taken away from me. Well, that's what happened with strips and Slick Magazine and illustration too. By the time I was ready, they were already dying, being throttled, squeezed, and distorted, and the whole concept of hero, heroine, adventure had been tainted, spoiled by the war. Gritty realism had shattered an awful lot of those fantasy dreams. The strip medium had changed. The big squeeze was on to force it out, not give it the area and respect it once had. CBA says, but you were able to take your love of that and put it into the comic book medium. Alex says, well, it was a wonderful training ground. It was on-the-job training is what it was. To be able to, during World War II, when the old-timers were drafted away fighting the war and left slots open for others to draw these silly things, so I was given a chance. As a kid of 15, still in school, he was a teenager when he was working professionally for some publications. Incredible. So it was an after-school hours thing for me, which was far better than schlepping wet bulk laundry or dry cleaning or some of the other odd delivery kid jobs I had. It was terrific. The ego thing, to see one's name in print, my God, who'd have thunk it? But then the appreciation for it came through the material and being paid. But still, a syndicated strip artist had a certain respected position in those days. It was a position of mystery. It's true, they were really regarded, highly regarded in those days. As you saw, Milton Caniff was on the cover of, I believe it was Time magazine at the time. They were like these considered great artists. And they were. But even back then, they were considered. So it almost puts the lie to those who said, oh, they never got the respect they deserved. I think they did, especially the comics artists, although it was Milton Caniff. So CBS says also Caniff was treated like a movie star. Exactly. Alex says, well, he was very good at promoting himself. And the Chicago Tribune, New York News Syndicate helped a lot too. Yes, it helped a lot. It helped sell the strip to more papers. That's funny. I don't know if that's a pot shot at Caniff, because I know that they had, as with many people, Toth had run-ins with them. clash with them sometimes. So maybe that's a little pot shot because, well, he was very good at promoting himself. Anyway, so CBA says, why wasn't Sickles received the same way? And Alex says, well, from all I've heard, AP didn't treat Sickles well. They cheated him when he found out how many papers and income Scorchy Smith was bringing in against his $125 a week. I think he finally got it up to that. In the 1930s, that was good money. The daily only strip was earning $1,500 a week. He just got fed up with it. He might have stayed had he been treated well, and that would be true for a lot of cartoonists and people everywhere in all kinds of jobs. So I missed having that goal and reaching it, except as a ghost or as an assistant, the Warren Tufts thing, which was a few months here and there, then a brief stint on Roy Rogers subbing for Mike Aarons when he was ill. So Toth did draw some comic strips at times. I saw some of them. In one of the books I have, they show them. So he got a taste of it at least. So young comic book artists, so CBA says, young comic book cartoonists look at Kniff and Sickles and don't get it, don't understand it. They think it's antiquated. How can they see what's really there? So Toth says, well, they probably won't until maybe another 10 years of living and seeing, assessing things, because their heads are filled with the hot artists in comic books today. They can't see beyond admiring Kirby and Adams, Jack Kirby, Neil Adams, and whoever else was the hot shot 30 years, 20 years, 10 years ago. That's as far back as they go in time, and everybody keeps regurgitating Kirby Adams. And Miller. He goes, and Miller. Well, that's another story. So he didn't have too high an opinion of Frank Miller. I assume he didn't read Daredevil Born Again, that Mass Kelly drew, that Frank Miller wrote. If he did, I think he would have reevaluated Miller, because that was so great. And also The Dark Knight, whatever he thinks of it, whatever anyone else thinks of it, it's a great story. It's great. Okay, so it goes, but Kniff, Sickles, etc., the syndicated strips' best past masters' works are quiet compared to comic book art, storytelling, characters, and whatever. It's unfortunate that because you like chocolate, you can't like vanilla, that you can't appreciate other things than what you happen to be very hot about at the moment. It's a big blind spot that young people have about their favorite artists or whatever craze are locked into, which turns them off and on. This tunnel vision, which I find very strange. They see only that and nothing else. Don't confuse me with facts, just let me do my thing. I love this type of art and only that type of art. When they're older and more mature, if they're lucky, they'll come to appreciate a whole century of newspaper strip art. Sunday pages and dailies to admire, to be entertained by, to just read. The funny stuff as well as the straight. And fine art and photography, of course, yes. Sickles and Kniff are grouped together so often. Can you distill the difference between them? And Toth says that the younger Noel Sickles was the teacher of the older. That's a bold statement. The younger Noel Sickles was the teacher of the older. Milt Kniff, illustrator, reporter is what Sickles was. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't cartoon things. He played it very straight. He was an illustrator, period. He drew beautifully, had a great eye for perspective, aerial perspective, the whole ball of wax. What he did with figures and lighting and storytelling, the movie techniques he brought into his strip, black and white photography being 95% of movies in those days, excited him. And he adapted it into his work on Scorchy Smith, using one gray tone in his black and white art to indicate patterns, light sources, showing their effects in snow scenes, night scenes, remarkable stuff. He was brilliant. Kniff, on the other hand, was more the cartoonist, capable of the Bigfoot stuff, although Sickles had that in him too. Both of them much appreciated Roy Crane from the get-go, admired what he could do with simple lines, but also the marvelous caricaturist fantasy artist T.S. Sullivan. What turned on Sickles must have turned on Kniff, regarding the works of certain artists, cartoonists, painters, because Sickles was keen about impressionists, Monet Sisley, the political cartoonist David Lowe, who had lush, wonderful lines and spouting rich blacks, way of drawing and staging. His political cartoons were works of art. Sickles was strongly influenced by Sullivan's distortions, realistic and fantastic at once, plus the influence of the simplicissimus German artist, caricaturist, illustrator Thony and Blix, Gulbrandsen. He took it all in. Some of it infected Caniff's work, echoes of that influence through Sickles. But Caniff was aware of self-promotion and how important it would be for a strip like Terry and the Pirates. I don't know what he may have done to promote Dickie Dare for AP Features, ungenerous with its money or their own promotional material. But he was helped by deep pockets of the Chicago Tribune, New York News Syndicate when he got Terry, and they made the most of it. I've got clips from Mini Cam Photography, a little slick magazine of World War II, and it's spread with lots of photographs of Milt in Chinatown, New York, with his models for the Dragon Lady, Burma, and Pat Ryan. How he took his own photographs with his Rolly twins lens reflex camera at his high Torridge home in New York. There was an issue of a fashion magazine, Vogue or Harper's Bazaar, a big spread. Some fashion designer had used Caniff's drawings of evening-gowned women from his strip, literally, made the gowns for models who looked like his characters. How Caniff drew them, and the gowned photo models. It was great fun, done with quality and respect. Caniff, throughout his career, was very adept at self-promotion. Again, he's hitting that home 3 times so far. So funny. Was very adept at self-promotion, but he was a great artist, Milt Caniff. Whatever else he was a great cartoonist, great draftsman. And again, his wrinkles and clothing and the black spacing for that, I think second to none. Second to none. Okay, so he goes, was very adept at self-promotion with the assistance of the syndicate behind him. But Sickles had other fish to fry. After his experience with AP, with a strip that I'm sure he enjoyed doing, he went off into advertising. Of course, that evolved into doing those Mr. Coffee Nerves Sunday page at comic ads with Caniff, using their combined alias, Paul Arthur, their middle names, and other ad work on his own. Halftone, line, color, and he wound up doing ghost work for Caniff on Terry because Caniff's phlebitis, is that a disease, gave him trouble, perhaps due to malaria or not from his Florida days. Sickles was very handy, thank God, to jump in when he did. Caniff had other people on call to assist, Alfred Andriola, Charles Robb, Ray Bailey in his home studio, and there was Frank Egley. Frank Egley, master letterer and colorist of the Sunday Engraver color guides, when Caniff didn't do them. There was a secretary, I forget her name, but anyway, he was all set up in his home studio. CBS says, but of the two, Sickles' work spoke to you more, appealed more. Alex says, yes. Keep going back and forth between Alex and Toth, but yes, I always called his work reportage because it had a matter-of-fact way of setting things down, which to me was damn bare-faced honest. He very rarely pulled tricks, and if he did, and I caught him at it, he'd failed. And when he failed big. He made it very obvious when he failed, whether it was just a throwaway or whether he just guessed wrong. But his batting average was pretty damn good. Oh yes, excellent. In your art, especially the romance work, you were very influenced by what was going on in illustration at the time. Al Parker, Whitmore, John Whitcomb. What excited you about that stuff? So Toth says, first of all, romance was very special. It dealt with emotions in a different way than the slam-bang adventure stuff. There are a lot of things under the surface. A lot of dialogue could say this, but the expression of the person would say that. Maybe only the cameras, us, the reader's viewpoint, would reveal the truth when she said, "I love you too, George." Her face, eyes were saying something else. And the reader knows that, but George doesn't. He can't see that. So there were all these little nuances of the line readings, acting, reacting, interpretation, layers of character, personality, integrity, etc. People bouncing off each other. That was suddenly very grown up, as opposed to the slam bang. It was a whole new ball game, and it forced me to really pay attention. It was a whole new, and look, learn, and listen. It forced me to really pay attention and look, learn, and listen. I was lucky to have good scripts. The best romance writing was by Kim Amat. Really good. I looked for ways to put more into interpreting ping-pong dialogue scenes, the give and take between a guy and a gal or gal and boss, and not reduce it to talking heads. Though a lot of it did wind up being close-ups, I was enjoying characterizations, overdoing it, not as subtly as I might have. Toth, however critical he is of other artists, he was very harsh on himself. So CBA says, well, close-ups in movies were different. A close-up was used for real impact. Alex says, exclamation points, yes. I grew up with radio drama and comedy and movies, with the sounds, colorations, characters. Movies, a once-a-week thing, if that. So radio plus reading formed my own pictures of how characters might look. Our writers' descriptions of scenes were brief, which I liked, and the other times too brief, where I would have appreciated a firmer nudge in the right direction. Emotional drama, as opposed to physical, suddenly was center stage, and I wanted to do it right. Plus, I enjoyed doing the stylish thing, well-dressed men and women, inspired by Parker Whitcomb, plus fashion magazines to bone up on the latest thing. To smartly dress men and women. It was fun. Because plus Hollywood was the great fashion setter. Movies. Great stars dressed in their best in those smart romantic comedies or dramas of the 20s, of the 30s and 40s and 50s, before everything went sour. There was a lot more to telling a story without physical action to lean on, to make it dynamic, to draw the interest of our female readers, using dramatic tricks, close-ups, poses, and attitudes, expressions to give the story more punch without overdoing it. It was great fun to learn anew. You think you know enough, but you don't. You must open up. Let it in. Awesome. CBA says, and learn by doing it. He goes, yes. Alex says, yes, to be receptive. Admit what you don't know, which few are willing to do. Start from square one. Again. If I hated a script, I couldn't send it back to the editor, I was capable of doing a throwaway job to just get it out, not see it anymore. But if really interested in doing my very best, not repeat myself, not fall back on easy ways out, because this script warranted better than average effort, I'd give 110% via a lot more erasing than drawing. And then he says, and then CBA says, then how come your originals are so clean? There's not a lot of whiteout, not a lot of heavy erasing. Toth says, there came a time when I had to unlearn many things. CBA says, you were talking about silhouettes, off tape. Alex says, first of all, the strongest graphic image you can have, positive, negative. Absolutely true. And CBA says, the ultimate simplification. The ultimate simplification. Toth says, exactly. The value of it. World War II, we had these images printed everywhere. 3 views of German, Japanese aircraft. We had black bakelite models of these aircraft, government property. U.S. Army Air Corps, Navy, Marine Corps issue got into the civilian population. So we all knew what German Dornier bombers looked like, and a Junkers, and Messerschmitt 109s looked like, and a Spitfire, and a Hurricane. Just from the outline, CBA says, yes, that's all you needed, Toth said. CBS says, it's the same with characters. Everybody has a different... You should be able to tell Superman from Captain Marvel. And Toth says, the beauty of it, of course, gag characters lend themselves to this so much better than straight. With the exception of something like Batman, it can be used in so many dramatic ways, as you see in movies, TV, illustration, and comics. Very effective to know where and when to use it. To establish depth in a panel, a solid black is a local color, or a drop shadow. Establish planes of depth from foreground to background to create mysterious effect, hide anything, reveal anything with it. It's a very potent graphic device. CBA says, another device is color, but you never really colored your own work. Why is that? Toth says, the business was not set up that way then. First of all, I spent my time 3,000 miles away from New York, where the action was, mailing stuff in and out with my color notes all over the margins of my pages, as I could hear dialogue spoken when I penciled inked or was writing it to illustrate it. I could hear the way it would be said by the woman, the man, the kid, whatever. So too, color was important. I wanted to get my 2 cents in writing color notes, which I was told long after the fact nobody paid attention to, because they were trimmed off by the engraver for his line shots. The colorist didn't see them. I wanted to do coloring, in spite of the fact I was told I was colorblind, color insensitive. And CBS says, are you colorblind? Toth says, to light tints of blues, grays, and greens, color confusion. CBA says, a lot of illustrators and cartoonists are colorblind. Toth says, I understand that. CBA, more truckers colorblind. John Byrne, Chaikin. Toth says, those who work in color all the time, who confess to being colorblind. That's a rarity. CBA says, when did you start doing your own lettering, and why? Was it for control? Alex says, Alex was one of the greatest, Toth was one of the greatest letters ever. I mean, ever. Beautiful. In the comics, on his postcards. So he says here about lettering, he goes, when I visited dear old Shelley Mayer 1,000 years ago at 225 Lafayette Street at Gaines Publishing, All American Comics, he said, kid, learn to do it all, to letter. The more you do of your own work and less you rely on somebody else, the better that work is going to be. And CBA says, did that include writing? And this is where Toth, I mentioned the old day, Toth says he didn't stress that, damn it. And I wish he had. I came to writing much too late, and I still can't call what I did writing. I could not write on demand continually, or I've had been doing it all these years, sitting here out of the business, because I could not write stories that pleased me. I learned how, but backed into that. My little one-pagers here, 2-pagers. So CBA says, well, you wrote some of your Warren stories too. Alex says, Toth says, that came later. CBA says, some people think the best comics are written and illustrated by the same person. Do you agree? Toth says, exactly. And I agree too. Will Eisner, Miller at his finest. And just something about that, it's of one piece. It's the same mind doing everything. There's integration there. Sometimes you have, people, artists, writers who clash. You could tell within their story that they clash, within their styles they clash. Sometimes inkers are the dead wrong inker for certain pencilers, and so on. But if you write pencil, ink, letter, color, it is something about that of one piece. It's of one piece, that art. So Toth says exactly, as in the CBA says, some people think the best comics are written and illustrated by the same person. Do you agree? He goes, exactly. He goes, really? And Toth says, yes. There's something about having that total vision, control. It sounds very lofty and pretentious. We're just talking about comic book work here. Now, I will take exception to that. He's the master, yes, and I love him. But he still had this slight, he loved comics, he loved comic strips, a slight contempt for it by what he just said there. And I think some of the old timers had that. I know John Romita was waiting for the comic book industry to collapse on itself. So there's this idea where he says here, we're just talking about comic book work here. Well, I take it deadly seriously. I love comics. I love my own comics. I love creating them. Love writing them and drawing them and then rereading them and making sure that they're as good as I want them to be, and go back on it over and over again to say, okay, this is good. If it's good for me, it's probably going to be good for the audience. And so there's this little tinge of, and look, maybe it's the fact that he basically became a recluse. He didn't work for a number of years. He did his doodles for years, while a guy like Will Eisner in his 80s was still producing graphic novels regularly, every year, if not even more. I would have loved to see Toth be that productive, because there were a number of years where he was in the wilderness and we didn't get to experience the greatness of Toth at his full powers. We saw, Bravo for Adventure, but I wanted more. I always want more from Toth. So I personally take a little exception to it, because again, what he gave to this industry, he gave it all. And if you give everything to this industry, you must love it to death. So to dismiss it, I don't know if it's something that maybe picked up from some other comic book artists, writers, editors, I don't know. But I know that he was a fan. He was, he loved comics. So this is my 2 cents about that. So he says, it sounds very lofty and pretentious, but no, it doesn't, because he says it right here. He goes, he agrees that the best comics are written and illustrated by the same person. He says, yes, there's something about having that total vision, control, right? And then he has to almost apologize for that by saying, it sounds very lofty and pretentious. We're just talking about comic book work here. Well, to me, again, if it's good, it's as good as any art. You put it up against any form of art, any other medium. When comics are at their best, it's as legitimate art as any other, and better than some. You have writing there, you have illustration there, you have even painting if you want, painted comics, you have all these type of techniques of telling a story in visual form. And it's a great art form. It really is, and it is an art form. And I think Will Eisner really took it deadly seriously. He was the one who was trying to push it to the point of getting graphic novels out there and getting them regarded by the public. In Japan, they're considered that way. Adults read, manga. Adults do. Families read them. So, again, I just appreciate the fact that I can admire this man as the master, and also, call him out if I think he undercut his own value and the industry that he loves. Now, again, not the industry, the medium. The industry can go to hell. A lot of it is absolute garbage. But the medium itself, words and pictures, the combination, the medium of comics, that's important. And Toth took it very seriously. Maybe not in words in this moment, but in his work he did. His work told us how deadly seriously he took it. It's like music, I don't care what an artist says, what a musician tells me, what he thinks his art is or his music is, or even the lyrics, honestly. I judge musicians by the sound that comes out of them, by the sound of their music, far more than what they explicitly think, say they think, claim to believe or not, or their lyrics. If they have great lyrics on top of that, great. It's the sound that tells me who musicians are. And it's Alex Toth's work that tells me how deadly seriously he took comic books. So he says here, yes, there's something about having that total vision control, ... It sounds very lofty and pretentious. We're just talking about comic book work here. Charles Schultz sat there, didn't make a big deal of it, just happened to do it all himself. Didn't need studio assistants, aides, gag suppliers. It was all so personal, clear, and clean, all him. That's fine. But he took it deadly seriously, Charles Schultz. He did a comic strip for 50 years. Every day. Dedicated his life to it. Loved it, clearly. You could tell in the work itself. It was beautiful. I have some books of Charles Schultz as well. I have two. The early Peanuts cartoons where he drew them like a little more like younger looking, like almost puppies. Like they looked really just adorable, from Charlie Brown to Snoopy. And then I have a behind the scenes look at his roughs. Maybe I'll show that also one day. Okay, so I can't get it. I mean, when it comes to Toth, I can't help but get passionate about it and even defensive about it when he, again, diminishes the medium he loves, that I love, that I've dedicated my life to. And I'm almost like, a part of me was like, damn it. You know, he took, when he did it, he took it deadly seriously, but he could have done more. Could have done more. And there was one interview where he said one of his regrets is that he doesn't have a stack high of comic strips that he did. That's part of it also. I think there's he beat himself up over it. Anyway, so I was stuck on this, but again, these are organic, my videos. I'm not going to, I set out to do something, sure, but I love this stuff. So if it doesn't interest you, hey, it interests me. So he says here, okay, so he says about the one-man army, which is Charles Schultz, right? Writing, penciling, inking, doing the work all by himself. Because the artwork was the least of it somehow, because he kept building his little world. He's talking about the great Charles Schultz. And his artwork was minimal, simple, formulaic, predictable, but he pulled many surprises out of the hat. Kept creating characters that were just cuter than hell. Terrific. He was a great letterer, by the way, and not been given credit, but he lettered very well. A nice, clean style, very legible. It was smart, and it fit into the rest of it. That's the important. See, that's when he starts getting passionate there. Toth, love it. He goes, that's the important. CBA. Would you say being an artist is really a solitary life? Alex says, it demands a selfishness, a self-orientation of interest. If you're serious about what you're doing. Some guys in the business never took it seriously. And again, think about that also, okay? Right there, he's resenting guys who didn't take it seriously. And then here he says, it sounds very lofty and pretentious. We're just talking about comic book work here. Not true. He loves it. And he's pissed off at those who don't. You know. He goes, it demands a selfishness, a self-orientation of interest. If you're serious about what you're doing. Some guys in the business never took it seriously. They could, when the 5 o'clock whistle blew, leave the plant like a Boilermaker. That's how much it meant to them. A way of making a buck. I never looked at it that way. Again, contradicting what he said earlier. And he didn't. I mean, look at this. He was a young man here in his 20s. Look at the care that he took. Look at that. Beautiful. Look at this. Look at that composition. It's fantastic. Look at this. I mean, look at that. Look at the drama there. Okay. I never looked at it that way. It was always with me. And it reminds me again of Charlie Schultz. They interviewed his wife, who said, I know no matter where we go, whether we're in Europe, whether we're driving to Arizona or shopping, this or that. I know where his mind is. He's still working. He's back there at the drawing board, and he's still writing that gag or drawing that panel. And Toth adds, it's a selfish mistress. And it is. It is. It truly is. In the best meaning of the word, in the way that Ayn Rand meant it. A rational self-interest, not at the expense of others. It's just a total focus within yourself and your work. Sometimes not directly at the expense of others, but maybe at the expense of giving time to others that you would maybe have liked to. Let's say that, possibly. But again, there's just something about being a cartoonist that you spend hours and hours and hours by yourself at your table. And you're working. And that's fine by you. There's no problem with that. We could be loners and hermits. So you're not missing out necessarily because this is what you want to do with most of your time. Personally speaking, that's how I live my life. I live a very, very solitary life. But I did enjoy, when I was able to at least, go to conventions and bring my books, my new books, and sell them and talk with fellow cartoonists. I love those things for a time, for a few days. It was great. Okay, so CBA says, did it have a negative effect on your life? About being self-oriented. He goes, did it have a negative effect on life? He goes, Alex says, oh yes. The more serious I got about it, the more it pulled me away from my wife, marriage, my kids, family, social events, so I don't have a good track record. CBS says, you're not a big supporter of painted comics. No. CBA, and I know why, so we don't need to get into that. Alex, are you sure you know the reason why? CBA, yeah, because it's not comics, it's illustration. Alex says, no, wrong, mainly wrong. It could be comics if those who know how to paint also knew how to tell a story, who knew what pacing was, and didn't just jam a lot of pretty pictures together into a pages, and call it a story. Continuity, it ain't. CBA says, look at this work, even the pencil work. Beautiful. CBA says, what did you think of Harvey Kirtman? Alex, brilliant. A solo act who, for some reason, needed a troupe behind him, around him. He would have been best left alone. He should have had a newspaper strip 1,000 years ago. As soon as his mad thing fell apart, he should have jumped right into a strip, as opposed to the cockamamie years with Hefner, Trump, humbug, and all other stuff which didn't work. He was deserving of being a very successful newspaper gag cartoonist, whatever he wanted to do, but do it all himself. Not have to deal with committee think and talk and impressing his way on anybody else's. Do it solo. I told him that when we bumped into each other in Vegas in 70 or 71. Put up as house guest by University of Nevada, Las Vegas personnel in their home. We hadn't talked to each other since that 1952 incident. Wow, 20 years. On that Saberjet job, if that's how it's pronounced, sorry. Because I dared to change one or two panels. I told him then, Harv, I won't be dictated to by you or anyone else. I respected you and went through the dying city with you, Thunderjet with you, climbed all over the planes on Republic's production line, made my sketches, took my notes. I was a good boy for $28 a page. Whoa. Meanwhile, getting $40 at DC. I did it out of respect and affection for you and for the subject matter. I can't make a living or a career out of working over your roughs and layouts, being locked in so tight and not being allowed to think for me to change this, do that, because everything was already lettered, borders inked in before you got the pages. It was all done except for the art. Just pencil in and follow directions. Follow the yellow brick road. He sounds pissed. Now me, I've never worked with others in any capacity, so I wouldn't know. I've written, penciled, inked, lettered, colored, self-published all my stuff, even ship it out myself. So I don't have that kind of frustration where someone does my work wrong, and I get, resentful and pissed off. And I hope I never do. Anyway, CBA says, do you think he squandered a big chunk of his career on little Annie Fanny? Toth says, I hated it. I hated it. Here you've got this fat magazine loaded wall to wall with beautiful, nubile women, round, plump, full-bosomed women, fannies, thighs, the works. What the hell do you need little Annie Fanny for? To me, it was like gilding the lily. What's the point? I never understood it. It became a very complex production problem. I told you about the multiple tissues of vellum overlays, each one color-coded as it went through the Hefner editing process. Change this, change that. Good God Almighty. I would have just tore everything up and thrown it at them and told them to go to hell. Either you do it or I do it. We can't both do it. But that's exactly what Harvey did live with. All those years he was connected. It paid very well, but he had to spend that money paying for Zeta, Elder, God, anybody in the world helping him do that damn thing. So many people. It's and it diminishes you, I believe, that kind of trouble dealing with others in that capacity. It must. That's me, sorry. CBA says, you're a big Frank Robbins fan. Toth says, I commented on Frank's work in Manuel Aud's Toth book and also in Comic Book Artists about being the wrong guy to do the Shadow and Batman. I loved his simpler Scorchy Smith. He's absolutely right about that. Because Frank Robbins, I've seen his stuff, and a little weird when he does someone else's work. His own was really good. It's like he took his own stuff far more seriously than they took, I guess, paid work. I loved his simpler Scorchy Smith. He shaped up fast on that strip. He came in knowing nothing about strip technique when he took that over, taught himself, studied everybody, Sickles, his predecessor on that strip, then Bert Kreisman, then Robert Storm briefly, and then bang! In came Frank, who stayed with it until 43, 44, left to start his Johnny Hazard for King Features. CBS says, you really like Johnny Hazard? Alex says, I liked Scorchy more. Why? Toth says, because he tightened up, slicked up so much on Hazard. He was loose, fast, and loose on Scorchy and simple. He got very shiny, glitzy, overdoing it to make King happy. King Features. The comic strip syndicate. He goes, King happy to earn his keep. Not necessary. Didn't have to do that. It wasn't until years later that he relaxed that a bit, but only on his Sunday pages. The deal remained quite tight. But his last 2 years on Scorchy Smith were just great. I wish I had a collection of that. There's a Russian sequence he did in those last years with the Russian and Nazi ski troopers at night. Snow scenes, stark black and white. He did a hell of a job. Beautiful stuff. Simple, stark design of the panels, 4 across in those days. Just great. I had clips of that sequence and lost it in my travels, from east to west and back, and could not find a source to get that sequence back again. Gorgeous work in there. Him at his best. Wonderful. It's why he didn't need glitzy shtick, habits formulaic on Hazard. And CBA says, you still keep up with the animation world. 1 second. Get a little dry mouth. And he goes, you still keep up with the animation world. Toth says, I try. CBA says, what have you seen that you liked? Iron Giant? Oh, man. Toth says, Iron Giant was marvelous. It absolutely is. I own that. It's so well done. Brad Bird, beautiful movie, well told, incredibly designed, great animation, great story. Classic. I forgot that Toth mentioned it here. So, Iron Giant was marvelous. And this Ruben Procopio sent me a copy of Milan, which I didn't expect to like, but there were a lot of very good parts in it. And I got a print of Pinocchio, which I hadn't seen in many years. I enjoyed that. And 101 Dalmatians animated, which I always liked. CBA says, Wallace and Gromit? He goes, well, that's something else again, totally different. Apples and Watermelons, wonderful, that one. He did 3 with those characters, but that second one, The Wrong Trousers, was absolute perfection. Every frame advances story, so true. Love those Wallace and Gromit movies. Man, it just, you get to know Toth through his words, through his passion. You can feel the passion. You can feel the anger, the frustration at times, and the absolute appreciation for comic book art. It flows right through him. There was no cover. He had no filter. He had no editor. He snapped at friends, from what I gather. That's why, they told me to almost warn me not to send him my stuff. I said, no, I gotta send him my stuff because he could be harsh. But that's fine. I take a beating from the master. That's fine. I was lucky, I guess. Because he liked it. Not lucky. He liked what I did. Someone tried to tell me once that it was actually online. It was the Toth fans forum, where someone in there was resenting the fact that I got the Toth endorsement, and he goes out, Toth is probably in a good mood. And someone who knew Toth, who ran that website, says, Toth, Alex, good mood? He goes, no. If he says something, he means it. And that's when you know, if he complimented you, hey man, it's awesome. Anyway, so he goes, the wrong trousers, walls and ground, goes, was absolute perfection. Every frame advanced the story. CBA says, you did quite a lot of experimentation with your Warren comics. Why was this period so fertile, so fertile in that respect? Alex says, I like being asked to do black and white comics that the tone would be acceptable. That the tone would be accepted, whether wash tones or zipatones, whatever. I didn't like the harder aspect, the vampires. CBA says, Warren is a pretty notorious character. Alex says, I don't know why, because he was decent with me and my late wife. A pretty damn good judge of character. Of course, she screwed up with me. But I remember talking to her, taking her to meet Jim Warren at the Hernando's Hideaway at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. We sat, drank, talked, and kibitzed all night long at a little table, and was delighted with him. Giggled her way through the whole evening. She was a wonderful giggler. If you heard her across the room, you wanted to giggle too. Anyway, she loved the guy, so that was the seal of approval. We never really bumped heads, he and I, dealing via phone calls and letters coast to coast. He was decent, fair. I don't think I got any special treatment, and I was the Auslander, the guy way out here in the boonies of California. I couldn't do anybody any harm, certainly, and I wasn't involved in any internal politics like maybe others, so it was just fun. CBA, you're a voracious reader. Is it mostly nonfiction biography? Alex says, mostly yes. As a kid, I read a lot of science fiction and comics and pulp magazines, but I got more and more into fact. Used to haunt the public library. Bios and autobiographies fascinate. The real deal, real people, real events, themes, different interpretations of them by those involved who write different books about them. I love to read about different disciplines. In the arts, writing, whether it's writing novels, short stories, comic strips, movies, TV, animation. I love to read what writers write about writing. I love the way he put that, because me too. I love to read what writers write about writing. I was a subscriber to Writer's Digest for many years. I loved the magazine and all the tips that all the writers gave to me on how to do it. I can't remember one of them, and I don't think they ever did me any good. As much as I love the magazine and the tips, and I appreciated them, but I could never put anything to use. I have to do it my own way, my seat-of-the-pants way, my stupid, thick-headed Hungarian way. There was no formula. I loved all their formula tricks, but I couldn't do it. And then very late, Neil Simon confessed that he sits down before a blank page, doesn't know where he's going, has no idea, hasn't pre-planned a thing, no first draft, second draft, or of anything. He sits and starts to write. Anything. Whatever comes to his head. He writes until something clicks and he's off to the races. From then on, it's easy for him. He hears the dialogue and writes it, bounces from theme to theme. So he writes without a plan, and that's what Milt Kniff said about Noel Sickles doing Scorchy Smith. He just made it up as he went along, day by day, and his defense was, well, if I don't know what the hell is going to happen tomorrow, how will the reader know? So it'll be more entertaining for both of us. Love that. Kniff said, there's a thing called 3-act play construction, and this is how it's done, and ingrained that into Sickles' head. But in the end, Kniff script doctored for Sickles. CBS says, that's how you wrote Jesse Bravo, though. It really flowed. You didn't structure it. Alex says, I had written some bits and pieces of Bravo, didn't have the full picture. And then when I sat down in 1975 to do that first 12-page episode, somehow it all started to work. But as I said, it was bad times. My wife was in and out of the hospital with 3 emergency surgeries that year. It was terrible. Every morning I would spend half my day at the hospital. So I was stealing sleep time and other time to try to write and draw. I'd start by rereading what I had done from page 1 right up. If I realized yesterday's work was atrocious, I'd tear it up and start over again from that point. He was prone to do that from what I gather. He used to literally tear up his art. And I believe his editors did that to him when he was young. I couldn't do that to myself, to my art. I just couldn't. It's, it's your baby. But I think he was taught by some nasty editors, Anyway, so he internalized that, unfortunately. So I was stealing sleep time and other time to try to write and draw. I start by rereading what I'd done from page 1 right up. If I realized yesterday's work was atrocious, I'd tear it up and start over again from that point. That's the way it went. Was backing and filling all the way to the bloody end, 12 pages at a time until done. I think that's the end of this. Yes, okay. So I'll leave it at this. And the next video, Alex Toth Part 3, I will read this interview, and I'll just leave this here for now. There's that image, by the way, that I showed at the outset. So it says here below, here's a description of this. Ye Ed calls this cover drop-dead gorgeous and one of his favorite Toth pieces, drawn in 1974 for Roger Stern. Okay, Roger Stern, another connection here. One of my videos, I read the Roger Stern omnibus, who wrote all of the issues that John Romita Jr. drew for his Spider-Man run. He's a great writer, and they were great. That was the best Spider-Man comic book stories since Lee and Ditko. Okay, so he drew this in 1974 for Roger Stern and Bob Layton's legendary fanzine, CPL, Contemporary Pictorial Literature, number 11. Now, that's pretty pretentious. But it's not because I think comic books are pretentious, but that name is Contemporary Pictorial Literature. Comic books. I'm fine with comic books. I'm even starting to pull back on the graphic novel term, to be honest. I even call my first graphic novel a comic book now. It's not. I'm not trying to be anti-pretentious. It's just the point that it is a comic book. Anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. I think again this is a good way for you guys to get to know Toth through his mind, how his mind works, by his own words, and you can tell the passion and the anger and the resentment and all that. And there are a number of interviews that I'll go through. I'll read through this, and then I'll go through the I guess memorial, this one, remembering comics legend Alex Toth. You got a lot of people weighing in here, a lot. So that'll be great too. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening again. And tomorrow night again, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm doing live streaming. I'm going to answer questions. I'm going to show some stuff. I'm going to talk about current events, maybe. We'll see. Whatever goes. Thanks again, everyone. Take care.